Okay. I'm Daniel Sones, and I was asked to talk about what life was like when I was growing up. I grew up on the coast of Mississippi. I was born in 1947. I grew up in a small community out in the country on a dirt road. As I've thought about this, 3 of my great-grandparents lived in this same community. I only knew one of my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather passed away when I was about 8 years old, and I remember going to my grandmother's home and seeing him when he had passed away. But as I thought about a lot of different things, we had a very close family. I was one of 7 children. My dad was a carpenter, and we did a lot of our own food production. We gardened usually an acre or 2, and then one of my grandfathers had several acres that he plowed and planted in, and we would all participate in that. So we grew a lot of our own food, a lot of our own meat, and things like that. I grew up as a member of the church. My great-grandfather, one of my great-grandfathers, joined the church about 1892. But the church was very slow growing at that time. It was until like 1922 before they organized the first Sunday school in our little branch. And it was called the Bayou La Croix branch, after the community. That was the name of the community where I grew up. I was blessed to have to be able to attend primary. Nearly everyone in the branch was related. My grandparents, my aunts, uncles, cousins were all members of the branch. And when I was a young teenager, I started working for a cousin who was a home builder. On Saturdays and during the summer, we would work for him and learn a lot about construction and so forth. My early memories of the church was primary, and my grandmother, I remember her teaching me. I can still remember the sound of her voice when she sang some of the hymns. My father never joined the church. He would attend sometimes, but he wasn't a member of the church. One of the stories that I remember that's dear to me, in June of 1955, my grandparents, my mother's parents, were sealed in the Idaho Falls Temple. That was quite an undertaking. I think they sold several cows to help raise money to be able to make that trip. My grandmother's sister and her son and his wife provided the transportation to be able to travel to out west. There were no temples except the ones here in the west, and so it was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip. But an interesting thing happened during that time that I want to share with you. When they were being sealed, they were sealed to each other, and then they had a son that had passed away when he was about between 2 and 3 years old. And from what knowledge I had of it, he was special needs. He was a handicapped child. So as the sealer started sealing that son to them, he stopped. And he asked him, he says, "Was there any other children?" And my grandparents said no, and he started to do the sealing of that child to him again, and then he stopped again. And he said, "Are you sure there wasn't any other children?" And my grandmother's sister said to her, "Well, you had your daughter that was born, but she died, or she was dead, stillborn." And the sealer said, "Let's give her name and seal her to you." And so there in the sealing room, they decided on a name for that little girl. And they named her Rosemary. And they sealed her to them. As far as back in that time, you didn't talk about family history, we talked about genealogy. And to me, that was a very boring subject as a child. But I had a cousin who was very diligent in searching out family records. And anytime he would speak in sacrament meeting, that's what he usually talked about. And so I wasn't that interested in it, but as I grew older, I decided to try to do some searching on my own. But back during that time, to do searches, you had to go to the courthouse or travel to another county or wherever the person happened to live to find any records. And I remember he was able to make contact with a Catholic priest in New Orleans and was able to write letters to him asking for information about a specific person. And the priest would look up in their church records and find the christening record and get that information and mail it back to him. But he would always send him $5 or some amount of money to cover the postage and to basically pay for the information that he got. After my wife and I were married, I remember we went to the courthouse near where she lived because some of my ancestors were in that county. Of course, back in that period of time in the 1800s, and the counties were a lot bigger. And so some of my family was actually in the Hancock County records, but at that time it was a different county, so we went to that county seat and searched, and it was quite a difficult job to search to find your family records and to get information. Well, as time went on, not long after that, the Washington, D.C. temple was built, and our stake used to charter a bus every few months. And each ward or branch was assigned a certain number of seats. And so my wife and I were able to go to the Washington, D.C. temple a number of times. And the trip was several days long. We would get on the bus in the afternoon at the stake center, and the trip was usually 21 or 22 hours nonstop. And when we got to the temple, in the early afternoon, we would go straight to the temple. And we would stay there and do one session after another until it closed. And then we would go to a motel and spend the night. And the next day we would go back and do the same thing again until in the afternoon. And then we would all get on the bus and spend another 22 hours or more riding back home. But those were very special experiences. I'll go back up a little bit. In 1966, I sent my papers in to go on a mission. I was the first full-time missionary to be called from our branch to serve a mission. And I went to Brazil in May of 1967 and served a mission there. That was a kind of a beginning of missionaries serving from our branch. My younger brother later served when he was of age. And then 4 of my nephews, 4 out of the 5 of my nephews all served missions too. And so from that time, there's been quite a few young people serve missions. If you were active, you had at least one calling in the branch, sometimes several. When I was 16, they called me to be the assistant branch clerk and taught me how to fill out the financial report every month, which was a big, long sheet, and it had to balance. All the accounts had to balance. So when I went on my mission, they asked you, one of the things they put on the little card with your picture in the mission office was what experience you've had or callings. Well, the only thing I had on there was that I was assistant branch clerk. So during my mission, I spent 13 months of my mission serving in 2 different branches as the branch president, because I knew how to fill out the report, I guess. So it was some great experiences in my life. Like I say, we grew up, we had a very close-knit family. We didn't have a lot of activities to do on Sunday afternoons. So a lot of Sunday afternoons, my parents we'd all get in the car and we'd go visit my grandparents. We'd go visit aunts, uncles, and other family members. And so I grew up knowing quite a few of those people. Not long ago, I had the opportunity in the Mount Timpanogos Temple to seal a couple together, a distant cousin and his wife, that I knew as a child growing up. And so it was a really special for me to be able to do that for some of my ancestors. I'm just so grateful for the many experiences that I've had. And all of our family grew up learning how to work. And we still try to carry on those habits today.